Our life was a masterpiece. From the outside, it was flawless, a perfect composition of success, love, and community respect. But I was the only one who lived inside the painting. I was the only one who could see the fine, hairline cracks spreading across the canvas. And I was the only one who knew that the beautiful, gilded frame was rotting from the inside out. To the world, my husband, Julian, was a hero. He was the real estate mogul who didn't just build luxury condos, he built community centers. He was the philanthropist whose name was engraved on plaques at the hospital and the local library. When he walked into a room, a hush of admiration followed him. He was handsome, charismatic, generous. He was, by all accounts, a perfect man. And for 15 years, I was his perfect wife. Our home was a testament to his success, a sprawling colonial with a garden I spent years cultivating, where we hosted charity galas and summer cocktail parties. Our life was a series of perfectly curated moments, each one reinforcing the public narrative of Julian, the benevolent pillar of our town. I played my part beautifully. I was Grace, his elegant, supportive wife, always smiling by his side, the silent partner in his performance of goodness. I loved him. Or, more accurately, I loved the man he presented to the world. I loved the idea of him. But in the quiet, unguarded moments, another man would surface. A man I didn't know at all. It started with the nightmares. They began about 10 years into our marriage, becoming more frequent over time. He would thrash in his sleep, his body rigid, a low groan escaping his lips. Sometimes he'd mutter broken phrases, always the same ones. "The rain, so heavy," he'd whisper, his eyes squeezed shut. "The headlights, just turn them off." I'd gently shake him awake, and he'd sit bolt upright, his chest heaving, his face slick with a cold sweat. He'd stare into the darkness, not seeing me. When I'd ask him what he was dreaming about, he would just shake his head, his jaw tight. "Nothing," he'd say, the word a wall between us. "It was just a dream." The next morning, he would be Julian again. Charming, attentive, dismissive. If I'd tried to bring it up, to suggest we talk about it, his face would close off. A subtle coldness would enter his eyes. "Grace, you're being dramatic," he'd say, his tone patronizingly gentle. "Everyone has bad dreams. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill." He was a master of that, making me feel like my concerns, my intuition, were a form of hysteria. Over time, I started to believe him. I started to question my own sanity. Then there was the box. In his immaculate, mahogany-paneled study, on the bottom shelf of a bookcase filled with leather-bound classics, sat a small, antique rosewood box. It was beautiful, intricately carved with a tarnished brass lock. It was the one object in our entire house that was completely off-limits. I'd asked about it once, early in our marriage. "What's in there?" I'd asked lightly, running a finger over the carved lid. His reaction was immediate and disproportionate. His good humor vanished, replaced by a flash of raw, defensive anger. "It's just some old papers from college. Nothing that concerns you. Don't touch it." The finality in his voice was chilling, so I didn't. For 15 years, that box sat on the shelf, a silent, locked testament to the part of his life he refused to share. It became a symbol of the darkness I felt but couldn't name. I would find myself staring at it sometimes, a cold knot of dread in my stomach. He was right, of course. It was just a box,
But I knew, with a certainty that defied all his gaslighting, that it wasn't just old papers. It was a tomb, and inside it, a secret was buried.
The veneer cracks. As you read the calendar notification and began the investigation, the voice should become hushed, almost clinical. The emotion is shock, but it is immediately internalized. As the evidence mounts, the voice drops in pitch and volume, becoming ice cold and razor sharp. The discovery is not a moment of sadness, it's a moment of chilling clarity. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. I got a call from the mayor's office. Julian was to be the recipient of this year's Founders Award, the highest honor our town bestowed. He was to be named our Man of the Year. The official ceremony was in a month. When I told him, he feigned a humble surprise, but I could see the glint of triumph in his eyes. This was the culmination of his life's work, the final undeniable validation of the perfect man he had constructed. I should have been happy for him. I should have felt proud. Instead, a wave of nausea washed over me. The cracks in the masterpiece were widening, and I was terrified the whole thing was about to shatter. A week later, the local newspaper ran a glowing front-page profile. Julian Ashton, the man who built a better community. There was a picture of us, smiling, on the steps of the new wing of the library he had funded. And there were his quotes. I read them, and the words on the page seemed to mock me. Integrity, he was quoted as saying, his voice a smooth baritone in my memory, is the cornerstone of a meaningful life. Without it, success is hollow. I felt my hands start to tremble. We must always be accountable for our actions, the article continued. It is our moral duty to face our past, learn from it, and strive to be better. That was the moment something in me snapped. The hypocrisy was so profound, so suffocating. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The perfect life, the perfect husband, the perfect lie, it was all built on a foundation of secrets, and I was choking on the dust. That night, I waited until he was asleep. I went downstairs to his study, the newspaper article clutched in my hand. I stood before the bookcase, staring at the rosewood box. The nightmares, the flashes of anger, the forbidden history, it was all in there, and I had to know. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I didn't have a key, but I had 15 years of pent-up intuition. I went to the junk drawer in the kitchen and found a small, forgotten set of precision screwdrivers. I took a hairpin from the bathroom. I knelt on the floor in the silent, moonlit study, and I went to work on the lock. It was surprisingly easy to pick. The old brass mechanism was simple. With a soft, metallic click, the lock sprang open. I paused, my breath catching in my throat. This was it, the point of no return. I slowly lifted the lid. The contents were not what I expected. There were no journals, no photographs, just a small, neat pile of yellowed newspaper clippings held together by a brittle rubber band, and on top of them, 2 small objects. My hand trembled as I picked up the first. It was a single silver earring, a delicate teardrop shape, now tarnished with age. The second was a set of old car keys, the kind with a simple metal head, for a car made long before electronic fobs. They were for a Ford Falcon. I set them aside and carefully unfolded the clippings. The headline, from a regional paper dated 20 years ago, hit me like a physical blow. College student critical after hit and run. Driver fled the scene. I read the article. my blood turning to ice. A 19-year-old girl, an art student named Amelia Vance, had been struck by a car while walking home from a party on a rainy night. She had survived, but her injuries were catastrophic. She was left permanently disabled, unable to walk or speak again. The driver was never found. The only evidence left at the scene was a partial tire track and a single silver teardrop earring, presumed to have been torn from the victim's ear on impact. Amelia Vance. I knew that name. Her family had moved away years ago, unable to afford her long-term care. I looked down at the tarnished silver earring in my palm. I looked at the keys to a Ford Falcon. I thought of the nightmares, the rain, the headlights. The secret wasn't buried, it was preserved. A private, grotesque trophy collection. My husband, the man of the year, the pillar of integrity, was a coward who had destroyed a young woman's life and run away on the dark, leaving her to die on the side of the road, and he had kept souvenirs.
In the movies, this is the part where the wife confronts the husband in a tearful, dramatic showdown. But I knew Julian. I knew a confrontation would be useless. He would lie, he would twist the story, he would gaslight me until I was the one apologizing. He was a master at turning his own guilt into my hysteria. So I didn't say a word. I carefully placed everything back in the box, locked it, and put it back on the shelf. I went back to bed and lay beside him, my body rigid, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing. The man I had loved was a monster, and I would not be his next victim. My mind, which had been a fog of confusion for so long, was now a machine of cold, clear, logical precision. Grief could wait. Justice came first. The next morning, I told Julian I was going to visit my sister for a few days to help her with the kids. He was relieved. He probably thought I was having another dramatic episode and was glad to have me out of the house. He kissed me goodbye, a gesture so full of casual hypocrisy it made my skin crawl. "Drive safe," he said. I didn't go to my sister's. I drove to a 24-hour copy shop in the next town over. I wore gloves. I made high-quality photocopies of every newspaper clipping. I took clear, detailed photographs of the silver earring and the Ford Falcon keys from every angle. I didn't touch the originals. They had to be there for the police to find. Then I went to the library. I spent hours researching, looking for the right weapon. I found him, Daniel Peters, an investigative journalist for the state's largest newspaper. His reputation preceded him. He was a bulldog, a man who specialized in cold cases, a man who never, ever let go. I bought a prepaid burner phone and a box of plain manila envelopes. I went to a small independent print shop and typed out a letter. It was anonymous, concise, and devoid of emotion. It was a simple statement of facts. To Mr. Peters, I believe the enclosed materials pertain to the unsolved hit and run case of Amelia Vance from 20 years ago. The evidence was found in the private possession of Julian Ashton, this year's recipient of the Founders Award. The original items can be found in a locked rosewood box in his home study. I trust you will know what to do with this information. A concerned citizen. I put the photocopies, the photographs, and the letter into the envelope. I drove to a post office 2 towns over, a place I had never been before, and I dropped the package into a blue collection box. The sound it made as it fell to the bottom was a soft, final thud, the sound of a fuse being lit. The weeks that followed were the most surreal of my life. I returned home and resumed my role as the perfect wife. I helped Julian pick on a new suit for the awards ceremony. I listened to him practice his acceptance speech, a nauseating monologue about community and compassion. I smiled, and I nodded, and I waited. Every morning, I would check the news, my heart a steady, patient drum. Living with him, knowing what I knew, was like living with a ghost. The love was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical observation. I was no longer his wife. I was a witness. During that time, I made my own quiet preparations. I met with a divorce lawyer. I opened a new bank account in my own name. I systematically moved my personal belongings into a small, secure storage unit I'd rented under my maiden name. I was dismantling our life together, piece by piece, right under his nose. He never noticed. He was too busy basking in the glow of his impending glory. The story broke on a Thursday, 1 week before the ceremony. I was at a small cafe downtown, having a coffee. I saw the headline on the newspaper stand before I even saw the paper. It was printed in a huge, bold font, right below the masthead. Man of the Year or Fugitive from Justice. I bought a copy, my hands perfectly steady. I sat down and read Daniel Peters' article. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. He had spoken to the original detectives on the case, he had interviewed Amelia Vance's family, and he had laid out the evidence from my anonymous tip with devastating precision. The article didn't outright accuse Julian, but it asked 1,000 questions he could never answer. I had just finished the last paragraph when my phone started ringing. It was Julian. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Then the texts started flooding in, a torrent of panic and confusion. Have you seen the paper? This is insane. Some reporter is trying to ruin me. Call me now. I didn't call. I just finished my coffee, paid my bill, and walked out into the sunlight. The implosion was swift and total. The mayor's office immediately postponed the awards ceremony. The board of the hospital asked him to step down from his position pending an investigation. His business partners issued a terse press release, distancing themselves from him. The police, armed with a search warrant and a front-page article, reopened the case. I wasn't there to see them arrive at our house. I wasn't there to see them find the rosewood box. I wasn't there when they arrested him. By the time the first police cruiser pulled into our driveway, I was already 200 miles away, driving towards a new life. I had left the divorce papers, signed by me, on his pillow. They say he was disgraced, that his perfect world had crumbled to ash. I don't know. I never looked back. I sold the house, gave a significant portion of the money to Amelia Vance's long-term care fund, and I moved to a city where no one knew my name. My life is quiet now. I volunteer at a support center for victims of violent crimes. I help people find their voice, people who were silenced by men like Julian. He wanted to be remembered as the man of the year, a man who built things. And in a way, he was. He built a perfect life on a foundation of lies. And he taught me that the only way to deal with a rotten foundation is to tear the whole house down and start again, on solid ground.